The cold fluorescent lights of the clinic hummed a low, monotonous tune. It was a sound I'd grown to hate. It was a soundtrack to waiting, to hoping, to disappointment. Outside, Chicago was buried under a fresh blanket of February snow. But in here, the air was sterile and warm, thick with the scent of antiseptic and quiet desperation. From my spot on the squeaking vinyl bench, I watched her. She was maybe 5, 6 months along. My eyes, trained by years of obsessive research, could pinpoint the stage with professional accuracy. She had that glow everyone talks about, a serene smile on her face as she rested a hand on the perfect curve of her belly. She was reading a parenting magazine, completely absorbed. For a moment, a bitter envy coiled in my stomach. It was a nasty, unwelcome feeling, but it was there. I pulled my old cashmere coat tight around me. It was a 3rd anniversary gift from Leo. The fabric was worn thin at the cuffs now, but I still loved it. It reminded me of a time when things were simpler, when the future felt like a wide-open road, not a series of closed doors. The wind howled outside, rattling the clinic's large windows, a reminder of the city's biting cold. Inside, I just felt hollow. Room 112. The number was printed on the flimsy piece of paper clutched in my hand. 112. I repeated it in my head, a mantra to keep my thoughts from straying into darker territory. The paper trembled, a traitor revealing the fear I was trying so hard to conceal. I had paid a small fortune for the blood work, the hormonal panel that was supposed to give us answers, and I'd paid just as much to get the results rushed. Without that extra fee, the nurse had said, it would be a week. I couldn't wait another week. Each day of not knowing was its own special kind of torture. The clinic's narrow corridors, built sometime in the late 70s, were a confusing labyrinth. Harried nurses in faded blue scrubs rushed past, their rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum. Elderly women clutched tote bags filled with prescriptions from the subsidized pharmacy. Young mothers navigated bulky strollers through the crowd. It was organized chaos, the kind I always got lost in. Years went by, but this place never truly changed. They had installed a digital ticket system and put computers at the reception desk. Colorful posters about healthy living now adorn the walls. But the soul of the place remained the same. The same indifferent look from the receptionist. The same creaking benches. The same smell of bureaucracy and illness. It was as if time had stopped here. I stopped in front of a faded plastic sign that read Room 121. The numbers were cracked and faded. I frowned. Of course, I'd mixed them up. Distraction had become my constant companion lately. I'd forget my keys. I'd leave the stove on. It drove Leo crazy. You're living in a fog, Naomi, he'd say, his voice tight with frustration. What are you always thinking about? What was I thinking about? I was thinking about the 3 years we had been trying for a baby. I was thinking about his mother, who asked about a grandchild every time she called. I was thinking about my friends, who were all posting ultrasound pictures and planning baby showers. And me. What about me? I turned to walk back the way I came, but I stopped short, as if I had walked into an invisible wall. A few yards away, standing in front of the ultrasound room, was Beatrice. B. Morris, my best friend since the 3rd grade. The same Bee I had shared my last piece of bubble gum with. The one I traded stickers with and cried with while watching sad movies. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 6 months. B, who worked for a large cosmetics company, had gone to Barcelona for a work project and then she just sort of vanished. She replied to texts with short, vague messages. She was always busy, always about to get into a meeting. But it wasn't the shock of seeing her in this old, run-down clinic that made my heart hammer against my ribs. My gaze fell, involuntarily, and locked onto her stomach. It was round and full, impossible to hide under her unbuttoned coat, and Bee hadn't said a word. Not a call, not a text, not a single hint. She, of all people, knew how desperately I dreamed of having a child. My first instinct was to call out her name, to run to her, to hug her and ask a million questions. But the impulse died in my throat. In that exact moment, I saw a man walking briskly down the corridor toward her. He was holding a bouquet of deep crimson roses, the Grand Prix variety, velvety and expensive. I knew them well. I ordered them for special clients at the flower shop where I worked. They cost a fortune. That bouquet was at least $200, far too much for our tight budget. Instinctively, I shrank back against the wall, pressing myself into a shallow alcove. The floor seemed to drop away beneath my feet. My knees felt weak. It was Leo. My husband. I knew every detail of him. The way he adjusted the collar of his shirt, the confident set of his shoulders. The same Leo who was supposed to be 2,000 miles away, on a crucial business trip in Stockholm. The same Leo who had video called me last night, showing me a snowy street outside his hotel window while complaining about the Scandinavian cold. The same Leo who wasn't supposed to be back for another 5 days. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. A bitter knot formed in my throat, and the metallic taste of bile filled my mouth. Thoughts collided in my head like panicked birds trapped in a small room. But one instinct rose above the chaos, sharp and clear. I had to know the truth. All of it. No matter how terrible. I slipped through the half-open door of a small, empty room. A supply closet. It smelled of bleach and damp mops. From the crack in the doorway, I could see the end of the hall, where Bea was now smiling. A radiant, joyful smile, as she accepted the bouquet from my husband's hands, from my makeshift hiding spot between brooms and buckets. I couldn't hear what they were saying. They were too far away. But I could see. I saw Leo's hand, same hand that had waved goodbye to me through a phone screen, rest possessively on Bea's rounded belly. I saw them exchange a quick, intimate kiss. The kind of kiss shared between people who know each other's secrets. They glanced around, making sure no one was watching. I saw Leo whisper something in Bea's ear, and I saw her laugh, throwing her head back just like she did when we were girls, giggling at some silly joke. I watched them walk into the ultrasound room together, hand in hand. The door closed behind them. I stumbled out of the closet, gasping for the stuffy corridor air. A nurse pushing a cart piled high with medical files gave me an annoyed glance and moved on. No one else seemed to notice the woman with a face as pale as the hospital walls. I couldn't make myself leave. My feet felt glued to the worn linoleum floor. Through the fog clouding my vision, I could make out the notice taped to the ultrasound room door. In a nurse's neat handwriting, it said, appointments, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. 15 minutes to decide what to do. 15 minutes to piece together the shattered remains of my life. 15 minutes to understand the betrayal of the two people I loved most in the world. And in my head, a single thought played over and over, like a scratched record from my childhood. They're having a baby. Leo and Bea are having a baby. A real baby. Made of flesh and blood. Not the phantom baby from my own frustrated dreams. A baby that I had wanted with Leo for 3 long, painful years. A baby we had planned for, taken endless tests for, swallowed vitamins for, and tracked ovulation cycles for. I leaned against the wall, the cold seeping through my coat. Images from the past flashed before my eyes. Leo, handing me an ovulation test, joking that soon there would be 3 of us. Bea, sitting in our kitchen, listening patiently as I cried on her shoulder about another negative pregnancy test. Leo, packing his suitcase for yet another business trip, promising that it would happen for us soon, that we just needed to relax. The clock on the wall showed that only 3 minutes had passed. Time was crawling, stretching each second into an eternity. I stood there, motionless, my head bowed, my face hidden in the thick wool of my scarf. The initial fear of being seen was replaced by a burning, overwhelming need to hear them when they came out, to find out how long this had been going on, to understand the depth of their deceit. An elderly cleaning woman pushed a bucket and mop past me, giving me a disapproving look. I was just in the way, another obstacle in her daily routine. I mumbled an apology, trying to force a polite smile. I couldn't leave. Not now. I had never been closer to the truth. Fragments of memory, suspicion, and doubt swirled in my mind. Strange phone calls that made Leo leave the room. Text messages he deleted quickly. His sudden allergy to my perfume, a scent he used to love. The business trips that became more and more frequent, from which he returned looking refreshed and satisfied. Not tired. Bea's growing distance. Our meetups becoming rarer. Then, it hit me with the force of a physical blow. That night back in May, I had called Bea, and she'd answered, her voice sounding breathless before she claimed to have a migraine. That same night, Leo had worked late at the office. He came home the next morning with a box of expensive chocolates, the kind I hated. The nausea returned. Deep down, a small, absurd part of me still hoped for a logical explanation. That this was all a ridiculous coincidence. That Leo had just run into Bea by chance. That her baby belonged to some other man. My God, what kind of wife was I? Willing to believe my best friend was pregnant by a stranger, just so it wouldn't be my husband? But when the office door finally opened, all those desperate hopes evaporated. I saw their faces. Happy and glowing. I saw Leo supporting me by the arm, treating her as if she were made of delicate glass. I saw the look that passed between them. A look filled with the kind of intimate tenderness that only exists between two people who are deeply connected. Then I heard my best friend's voice, full of emotion. Now that we know it's a boy, she said, maybe it's time to tell Naomi. She's going to find out sooner or later. I can't hide this belly forever. Not yet, Leo replied. And his voice, so familiar and yet so foreign, cut through me like a dull knife. She's completely unstable right now with that silly doll-making hobby. She's gotten it into her head that she's some great artist, that it's her destiny. She spends all night in her workshop, sewing, and then cries for hours. We'll handle it after the baby is born. I promise. By then, maybe she'll have pulled herself together. I gasped, the injustice of his words stealing my breath. My passion for making cloth dolls, which had started as an escape from the obsession with getting pregnant, had grown into something more. I had found my style. I had loyal customers. It was something I was proud of. And Leo, my husband, apparently saw it as just another one of his unstable wife's whims. It's always the same with you, B muttered, a strange mix of irritation and superiority in her voice. You're always protecting her. What about me? I'm tired of this. Leo, it's been over a year. Over a year. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. Over a year. The words echoed in the hollow space that had just opened up inside my chest. Over a year of secret meetings. Of stolen moments. Over a year of looking me in the eye and lying. And now, they were having a baby. A boy. While I waited for Leo to come home from his trips. While I counted the days to my next ovulation. While I cooked the pot roast he loved. While I cried into my pillow over yet another failed cycle. They were together. My husband and my best friend. Betrayal multiplied by betrayal. The doctor said we need to come back in 2 weeks for another scan. Bia's voice floated down the hall, muffled by the blood pounding in my ears. To check on his development. And I wanted to ask you about the birthing classes. I don't want to go alone. But they were walking toward me. A few more steps, and they would be right in front of me. A few more steps, and they would see me. Standing here with my dead eyes and frozen face. Without thinking, I turned and fled. I practically ran down the corridor, nearly knocking over a small, elderly woman with a walker. I muttered an automatic, meaningless apology and kept going. I half ran, half fell down the stairs, my hand skidding along the cool metal railing. I burst through the main doors and into the biting cold of the street. The February air burned my lungs. I didn't know if the wetness on my eyelashes was snowflakes or tears. Where could I go? What could I do? My thoughts were a tangled mess. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would break through my ribs. My first impulse was to run home, bolt the doors, change the locks, and throw every single thing Leo owned out the window. But a calmer, colder part of my brain whispered that it would only postpone the inevitable confrontation. Besides, I wasn't ready to explain myself. What would I even say? I saw you at the clinic with a pregnant bee when you were supposed to be in Stockholm. It sounded so cheap, so cliché. Like a plot from one of the trashy daytime soap operas my mother loved. With trembling fingers, I pulled my phone from my purse. 12:30 p.m. I still had more than 5 hours until my shift at the flower shop ended. I could call Martina, my boss, and ask to leave early. But what would I tell her? I just found out my husband is having a baby with my best friend. No, it was too private, too humiliating. The phone buzzed in my hand. A message from Leo. Hey. My son. How are you? It's snowing again here. Roads are a mess. Miss you? It was followed by a kiss emoji. My stomach lurched. Just like that. So simple. He was texting me words of love right after leaving an ultrasound appointment with his pregnant mistress. I started to shake. A violent, uncontrollable tremor. It was from the cold. From the rage. From the shock. Standing out here in the freezing wind was becoming unbearable. I started walking, with no destination in mind. Cars sped past, splashing dirty slush from the street. People hurried by, wrapped in their coats and scarves, their faces set against the cold. It was just another Tuesday afternoon in Chicago. The world kept spinning, even though mine had just been ripped apart. Without realizing it, my feet carried me to a small cafe called the Magnolia on a familiar street corner from my childhood. It was an old place, stuck in time, with 4 mica tables, faded yellow curtains, and the constant, comforting smell of fresh coffee and pastries. When I was a little girl, my mom would bring me here for a treat after a dentist appointment. It was strange that it had survived in an age of sleek, minimalist coffee chains. I pushed open the door, and a tiny bell chimed. The warmth and the smell of baking bread wrapped around me like a blanket. Behind the counter, a sturdy woman in a starched white apron looked like she had stepped right out of my childhood memories. "What can I get for ya, hun?" she asked, her voice a mix of briskness and kindness. "A tea, please." My voice was hoarse. I glanced at the pastry case. A croissant. I paid mechanically, took my tray, and found a small table in the corner by the window. My hands were still shaking as I wrapped them around the warm mug. Outside, the snow was falling in thick, soft flakes, turning the gray Chicago landscape into something almost magical. Over a year, the words echoed in my head. How could I have been so blind? What more signs did I need? All the little oddities, the small inconsistencies I had brushed aside, now assembled themselves into a devastating, undeniable pattern. The phone vibrated again. It was Martina. "Hello, Naomi. Where are you?" Martina's cheerful voice was almost painful to hear. "We just got a huge corporate order from a law firm downtown. I need 15 bouquets ready by 6. There's a bonus in it for us. Can you come in early?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. Work. It was something real, something tangible to hold onto. Besides, I couldn't bear the thought of going back to our empty apartment, where every object was a reminder of Leo. "Yes, Martina. Of course. I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour." "Great," she said, her energy crackling over the line. "Oh, and that nice Mrs. DeWitt stopped by, asking about your dolls. Said she wants something special for her granddaughter's birthday. Are you taking commissions?" My dolls. The passion Leo called my silly hobby. It had all started so innocently. A single cloth rabbit for our future baby. Then a bear. Then a fox. When it became clear that a baby wasn't coming, sewing became my therapy. Martina, seeing my talent, had suggested I display a few in the shop window. Soon, the first customers appeared. "Yes," I said, after a pause. "Tell her to come back. I'll talk to her." I hung up and let out a long breath. At least I had a purpose for the next few hours. Work had always helped me escape my problems. And right now, my problems felt inescapable. I arrived at the pedal pusher 40 minutes later. The small shop, tucked between a nail salon and a 24-hour convenience store, greeted me with the familiar, earthy scent of fresh flowers and damp soil. Martina, an energetic woman in her late 40s with a sharp haircut and even sharper wit, was already working on a massive arrangement. "There you are." She gave me a quick, assessing glance. "You look pale. You feeling okay?" "I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well," I lied, shrugging off my coat. "All right," Martina said, clearly not believing me. "You can tell me later if you want. Right now, to the grindstone." She handed me a printout. 15 bouquets. Corporate colors. Blue and white. We've got irises, freesias, white roses, and Lysianthus. I nodded, tying on my green apron. Flowers. Flowers never betrayed you. They were honest in their beauty and their fragility. They didn't promise forever. They just bloomed. And then they faded. Simple. Clear. For the next few hours, I worked on autopilot, trying to think of nothing but the flowers in my hands. Blue irises, white roses, sprays of green filler, decorative paper. My hands moved with a muscle memory of their own. But my thoughts, no matter how hard I fought, kept returning to the clinic. What now? Confront Leo? Make a scene? Pack a bag and leave? But leave to where? To my parents' house in the suburbs? To a friend. Which friend? All of our friends will also be as friends. "Naomi, are you okay?" Martina's voice brought me back. "That's the third time you've taken apart that same bouquet." I looked down at my hands. It was true. I was mindlessly rearranging the same cluster of flowers, pulling them out and sticking them back in. "Sorry, Martina. My mind's somewhere else." "Look." Martina came over, lowering her voice even though we were alone. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." I bit my lip, fighting back tears. I couldn't fall apart. Not here. Just personal problems, I mumbled. Martina nodded sympathetically. "Fight with the husband? Something like that." I thought with a bitter, silent laugh. Happens to the best of us. Martina said philosophically. Men. 20 years I've been with my Frank. And sometimes he still acts like a teenager. It'll blow over. You'll work it out. If only it were that simple. I just murmured something non-committal. By 6 o'clock. The order was done. 15 perfect bouquets were lined up on the counter, waiting for the courier. I felt drained. Physically and emotionally wrung out. Here. Martina handed me an envelope with my pay. Go home early today. I'll close up. Thanks, I said. Relieved. Outside. It was already dark. The streetlights cast a yellow glow on the snow-covered sidewalks. It was a 40-minute train ride home. But the idea of returning to that empty apartment made my chest tighten. And what if Leo was already there? Was I ready to face him? My phone vibrated. Another text from him. Hey honey. How was your day? I'm stuck in meetings. Going to be late tonight. Can we talk around 10? I turned the phone off, unable to read any more of his lies. It was almost 8 o'clock. Going home was out of the question. Going to my parents was also not an option. They would ask too many questions. As I tried to think of a refuge, I remembered Mrs. Vance. Eleanor Vance. She lived in my building. A few floors up. An odd woman. A little eccentric. In her mid-60s. She'd moved in about a year ago. She kept to herself. But she had taken a strange liking to me. It started when I helped her carry her heavy grocery bags up to her apartment. We got to talking. I learned she'd been a professional seamstress, working for high-end fashion designers. When she heard about my doll-making hobby, she offered to teach me a few professional tricks. Since then, we'd meet occasionally. I'd bring my work, and she'd critique it, offer advice, share techniques over tea and cookies. I valued those moments. There was something comforting about her calm demeanor and her wise, if slightly peculiar, advice. That was it. I would go see Eleanor. At least I could spend an hour there, collect myself, and then figure out my next move. I got to my building around 8:30. My heart leaped into my throat when I saw a light on in our 5th-floor apartment. Had he come home early? I hurried inside, avoiding eye contact with the doorman. I took the elevator up to the 7th floor, to Eleanor's apartment, and rang the bell. A minute passed. Nothing. Maybe she wasn't home. I rang again, holding the button down a little longer. Finally, I heard the sound of shuffling feet, and the door opened a crack. Naomi. Eleanor squinted at me through the opening. She was wearing a faded floral housecoat and thick wool socks. Did something happen? I opened my mouth to say something polite, to make up an excuse. But instead, a sob broke from my chest. All the tension, all the horror of the day, just exploded. Oh, my dear girl. Eleanor's hands flew to her face. Get in here. Quickly. She ushered me into her small, warm kitchen, sat me down at the vinyl-covered table, and immediately started fussing at the stove. You just sit. I'll make some tea. I baked an apple pie today. You'll have a slice. You'll calm down. And then you'll tell me everything. I just nodded, trying to stifle my sobs. Eleanor's apartment was always tidy, cozy, and a little old-fashioned. It smelled of cinnamon, lavender, and something else, something that smelled like childhood. 5 minutes later, a steaming mug of strong tea and a generous slice of apple pie sat in front of me. Eleanor sat opposite me, watching me intently over her thin-rimmed glasses. Now, she said gently, once my sobs had subsided into shuddering breaths, tell me what happened. And I did. Between hiccups and fragmented sentences, I told her everything. About seeing Leo and be at the clinic. About what I'd overheard. About the betrayal that had been going on for over a year. About the baby they were having. The baby I wanted so desperately. Eleanor listened in silence, not interrupting once. When I finished, the only sound in the room was the ticking of an old clock on the wall. What do I do now? Eleanor, I asked. My voice barely a whisper. She tapped her fingers on the table, her expression thoughtful. What do you want to do? She asked, turning the question back on me. I faltered. What did I want? Revenge? To just walk away? Forgiveness? I don't know. I confessed. I can't believe this is happening. It feels like a bad movie. Life sometimes writes plots more dramatic than any movie. Eleanor said calmly. But I will tell you one thing, Naomi. The most important thing right now is not to act on impulse. You can stay here tonight if you want. Tomorrow, you will decide what to do. Thank you. I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with gratitude. But I think I should go home. I have to face him sooner or later. As you wish, she said, getting up to clear the table. Just remember one thing. Whatever happens, it is not the end of the world. Everything will work itself out. You'll see. Her simple words were unexpectedly calming. I finished my tea, thanked her again, and went back to my apartment. As much as I wanted to delay it, I had to face the inevitable, and it was better to do it on my own territory. As I approached my door, I noticed the lights were off. So Leo had already left. Or maybe he'd gone to bed. I put my key in the lock, turned it slowly, and stepped into the dark hallway. The apartment was silent, but the faint smell of his cologne hung in the air. On the small table in the hall was a note, written in his familiar, looping script. My son. Stopped by to grab some documents for the trip. Tried calling, but you didn't pick up. Is everything okay? Call me when you get this. Kisses. L. I crumpled the note in my fist and threw it in the trash. Lies. Every single word was a lie. There was no Stockholm. No documents. Just deceit. I walked into our bedroom. I noticed the signs of his brief visit: damp towel slung over a chair, a closet door left ajar, the empty space where his travel bag usually sat. He had probably gone to be his place. I sat on the edge of the bed, overcome by a strange, hollow emptiness. I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to scream. I felt nothing. Slowly, I undressed, took a hot shower, put on my favorite flannel pajamas, and crawled into bed. Tomorrow I would decide what to do. Tonight, I just needed to sleep. Morning arrived with a dull headache and a heavy weight on my chest. For a few blissful seconds after waking, I lay staring at the ceiling, wondering at the source of my unease. Then, the memories of the previous day crashed down on me like a tidal wave. The clinic. B. Leo. The baby. It was a reality from which there was no escape, not even in sleep. I glanced at the digital clock on the bedside table. 7:30 a.m. Leo hadn't come home. Of course not. He was, after all, supposedly on a business trip. On my nightstand, the small notification light on my phone was blinking. More lies. I was sure. I forced myself out of bed. The familiar morning rituals: washing my face, getting dressed, putting the kettle on were infused with a strange pain, as if each action whispered, "This is the last time you will do this here. In this apartment. In this life." The life I knew was over. As I waited for the water to boil, I mentally reviewed my options. Call Leo and demand an explanation? Call B and tell her exactly what I thought of her? Or quietly pack my things and disappear, leaving them to deal with the consequences? My phone vibrated again. It was him. With a sigh, I answered. Hey, my son. His voice was cheerful, carefree. How are you? I was worried when I didn't hear from you last night. I'm fine, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Just a long day at the shop. I was exhausted. I get it. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. Listen. Things are taking longer than expected here. I think I'm going to have to stay a few extra days. Can you manage? I gripped my tea mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. A few extra days. A few extra days of lies. It was for the best. It would give me time to think. To plan. Of course I can manage, I replied, my voice cool. It's not the first time. Perfect, he said, sounding relieved. I'll call you later. Okay. They're waving me into a meeting. Fine. I hung up before he could launch into his usual string of false endearments. I left the untouched tea on the counter and walked into the living room. My eyes landed on the large framed photo on the wall. Our wedding picture. The two of us, happy and smiling, surrounded by friends and family. B was standing next to me, my maid of honor, holding my bouquet. How was she looking at me in that picture? Now, with the clarity of hindsight, I thought I could see something in her eyes. Envy. Calculation. When had it started? Right after the wedding? Or before? The doorbell buzzed. A sharp, unexpected sound. Who could it be this early? I went to the door, peered through the peephole, and froze. It was Eleanor. Open up. Naomi. I know you're in there. Her voice came, muffled but firm. I opened the door. Eleanor looked different. She wasn't wearing her usual housecoat. Instead, she had on a smart navy blue dress and a light coat. Her gray hair was neatly styled, and she wore a touch of lipstick. "Are you going out?" I asked, confused. "No, we are," she announced, stepping past me into the apartment. "Get dressed. We're going out for breakfast." "No stewing in this apartment by yourself." But I started. "No buts." Eleanor walked with authority into my living room and stopped in front of the wedding photo. "So that's the husband. Handsome man. A pity he's a fool." A small, surprised laugh escaped my lips. There was something liberating in her bluntness. No pity. No platitudes. Just a statement of fact. "Okay," I said, surrendering. "Give me 5 minutes." 15 minutes later, we were sitting in a cozy retro-themed diner that had recently opened. The interior was a faithful homage to the 1950s, with red vinyl booths, chrome-edged tables, and a jukebox in the corner. "So," Eleanor said, getting straight to the point as she stirred her tea, "what have you decided?" I sighed. "Nothing yet. Leo called. He said his business trip got extended. I have a few more days to think." "And how will you spend them?" Drowning in tears and self-pity, Eleanor's voice was laced with a gentle irony. "What do you suggest I do?" I asked, a little defensively. "Pretend nothing happened." "No." She took a sip of her tea. "I suggest you use this time wisely. Prepare yourself." "Prepare for what?" "For your new life," Eleanor said simply. "Because your old one ended yesterday in that clinic." A lump formed in my throat. I knew it was true, but hearing someone else say it made it painfully real. "A new life?" I repeated. "It sounds nice in theory. In practice," she continued, "you need to sort out a few things." She started counting on her fingers. 1. Where are you going to live? 2. How are you going to support yourself? And 3. What do you want from your soon-to-be ex-husband and ex-best friend? I stared at her. "But I haven't even decided." "They are already your exes," Eleanor cut in. "The moment they betrayed you, they ceased to be yours. So, decide. Do you want to separate quietly? Or do you want a dramatic showdown with broken plates?" I thought about it. What did I really want? Vengeance? Or just to leave and start over? "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I don't want a scandal. I just want this to be over." "Very well." Eleanor nodded. "Then we proceed with cold calculation. Whose name is the apartment in?" "Leo's," I said. "He owned it before we got married." "That complicates things. But it's not the end of the world. It means you can't stay. You could go to your parents." I pictured my mother, a well-meaning but overbearing woman who adored Leo. Telling her about the affair would be an endless ordeal of tears, lectures, and the inevitable "I told you so." "No," I said firmly. "I won't go to my parents. I'll find a place. I have some savings. And my job is stable. And I have the dolls." "Good," Eleanor approved. "Work is vital. As for a place to live, I have an idea. But we'll get to that. Now, the second question. How will you tell your husband you want a divorce?" I flinched. The thought of that conversation filled me with dread. "Maybe I'll just leave a note," I suggested weakly. "Pack my things and go. Then call him and tell him I know everything." "You're afraid," Eleanor stated, her gaze perceptive. "That's understandable. But Naomi, you need to tell him to his face. Not for him. For you. So you don't spend the rest of your life wondering what if. If he denies it, if he begs for forgiveness, you will simply state the facts. I saw you. I heard you. I am leaving. Goodbye. No arguments. No justifications." I imagined the scene. It made me tremble. But Eleanor's words made sense. Better to face him once than to replay the conversation that never happened in my head for years. "Okay," I said, a new resolve hardening inside me. "That's what I'll do. I'll wait for him to come back. And I'll tell him everything." "Excellent." She patted my hand. "In the meantime, let's deal with the practicalities. You need to find a place to live. And you need to move your most important belongings before that conversation happens. Just in case." After breakfast, we went to Eleanor's apartment. In the daylight, her home felt even more like a sanctuary. Books were everywhere, piled on shelves and stacked on tables. Old photographs in silver frames lined the mantelpiece. In one corner stood an antique sewing machine, its cast iron base decorated with intricate scrollwork. "Sit," Eleanor said, gesturing to a sofa covered with a handwear-upon afghan. I want to show you something. She disappeared into another room and returned with a thick folder. What's this? I asked. Deeds, she said, placing the folder on the coffee table. To this apartment, and to another one I own. A little one-bedroom in Lincoln Park. It's sitting empty. And I was confused. And you can stay there until you get your life sorted out, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. There's no sense in you wasting money on rent. I was floored. To accept such a favor from someone I barely knew felt wrong. Presumptuous. Eleanor. I can't, I said carefully. That's too generous. Nonsense. She waved a dismissive hand. The apartment is empty. It's better to have someone living in it. And besides, she narrowed her eyes with a mischievous glint. It's not entirely for free. What do you mean? You will sew your dolls under my direct supervision, so I can continue your training. And you will teach me how to use that. What is it called? That Instagram thing. I want to start selling some of my old designs online. I couldn't help but smile. The offer was a lifeline. And she was right. Spending my savings on rent right now would be foolish. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I did to deserve your kindness. Sometimes people just help each other, she said simply, especially when they understand what the other is going through. Now, enough sentimentality. Let's go have a look at the apartment. The place in Lincoln Park was just as she had described it. Cozy, a little dated, but immaculate. It had a small kitchen, a decent-sized bedroom, and a living room with a large window overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street. It felt safe. I love it, I said honestly. It's yours for as long as you need it, Eleanor said, pressing a heavy set of keys into my hand. Now let's go back. You have packing to do. On the way back, I called Martina and told her I needed to take some unpaid personal days. Thankfully, she didn't pry. Back in what was no longer my home, I began to pack. Clothes, books, my sewing machine, photo albums. I paused in front of the china cabinet. Should I take the plates we bought together? The tea set his mother gave us? Don't take anything that could be a point of contention, Eleanor advised, as if reading my mind. Only your personal things. The rest can be divided up later. Officially. By evening, my most essential possessions were packed into boxes and suitcases. Tomorrow, we'll call a car service and get all of this moved, Eleanor said. Now, you get some rest. It's been a long day. Alone in the apartment, I walked through the rooms. Strangely, now that the decision was made, I didn't feel anger, just a vast emptiness. On my nightstand was her wedding photo in its silver frame. I picked it up, looking at our happy faces. Was it all a lie from the start? Or did something change along the way? No, I told myself firmly, putting the photo face down in a drawer. This was not my fault. This was their choice. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo. How was your day? My son. Drowning in work here. But thinking of you. Talk tomorrow. I didn't reply. What was the point? Tomorrow, I would move my things. The day after, when he returned, I would tell him it was over. And then, I would start my new life. With that thought, a strange sense of peace settled over me, and I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken by my phone ringing. It was Martina. Naomi. Her voice was tense. Are you at home? Yes. Why? A woman just came into the shop, asking for you. Said it was urgent. I sat up, suddenly wide awake. What woman? I don't know, but she seemed very upset. Said it was about your husband. A cold dread washed over me. B. It had to be B. What did she want? What did she look like? I asked, my voice low. Tall, dark hair, pregnant. Martina described. Maybe 6 or 7 months along. It was her. Thank you for telling me, Martina. I immediately hung up and called Eleanor. She's looking for me, I said, the words tumbling out. B was at the shop. Let her look, Eleanor said calmly. You won't be here. I'm calling Pascal. He'll be there with a van in an hour. Finish your packing. An hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Eleanor, and with her was a tall, quiet man with kind eyes. This is my nephew, Pascal. She introduced him. He's going to help us move. Pascal didn't ask any questions. He just started carrying boxes down to the van with a quiet efficiency. Within half an hour, the apartment was stripped of everything that was mine. As I stood in the doorway for the last time, I felt no sadness, only a profound sense of relief. "Let's go," I said to Eleanor, closing the door on my old life. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. I arranged and rearranged my belongings in the small Lincoln Park apartment, trying to make the unfamiliar space feel like home. Eleanor was a constant, calming presence. She would appear at my door with homemade soup or fresh bread, offer practical advice on everything from hanging curtains to finding the best local grocery store. And most importantly, she would just listen. I found myself telling her things I had never told anyone, not even me. I talked about the wedding, the early, happy years of my marriage, the slow, creeping distance that had grown between me and Leo, and the painful, obsessive cycle of hope and disappointment that came with trying to conceive. "You know," Eleanor remarked one evening as we sat in my new living room, sipping chamomile tea. "In a way, you were lucky." "Lucky?" I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "How am I lucky?" "You found out now, not 10 years from now," she explained, her gaze steady. "And not after you'd had a child with him. Imagine finding out then, when your lives were even more entangled." I considered her words. She was right. As painful as this was, it could have been worse. Far worse. "I guess you're right," I conceded. "It's just not much of a consolation." "I'm not trying to console you," Eleanor said. "I'm just stating a fact." "Speaking of which, when is your husband due back?" "Tomorrow," I said, my stomach tightening. "He called today, said his flight from Stockholm lands in the evening." "And you're going to tell him?" "The truth," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "That I know everything. That I'm leaving him. That I want a divorce. And if he denies it? If he begs for forgiveness? Promises it was the first and last time?" I pictured the scene, a grimace forming on my face. I knew Leo. He would deny, deflect, and then, when cornered, he would plead. "It won't work," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. "My mind is made up." "Good," Eleanor approved. "But there's one thing. Don't go alone. You think he might get violent." The thought had crossed my mind, though Leo had never been physically aggressive. "You never know what people are capable of when they're cornered," she said evasively. "It's better to be safe. Take someone with you. Pascal, for instance." I hesitated. The thought of having a stranger present during such an intimate, painful confrontation was unsettling. But the thought of facing Leo alone was terrifying. "Okay," I agreed. "I'll ask him." "He'll do it," Eleanor assured me. "I've already spoken to him. He's waiting for your call." I smiled. This woman, a practical stranger, had done more for me in a few days than most people do in a lifetime. "You know, Eleanor," I said, half joking, "you're like a fairy godmother." "Hardly," she scoffed. "I've just lived long enough to know how the world works. Now, about your dolls. What are your plans? Will you continue making them?" "Of course." My eyes lit up. "It's more than a hobby. It's what keeps me sane. And it's starting to bring in a little money. I have a few regular customers." "I was thinking," Eleanor said, a thoughtful look on her face, "perhaps you should open your own little shop. Not right away, but in time. I know someone who has an empty retail space on the ground floor of their building. It used to be a little bookstore. They might rent it to you for a reasonable price." I stared at her, stunned. My own shop. It was a dream I had never dared to voice. Leo had always dismissed the idea. "A shop? Do you have any idea what that costs? Rent, taxes, inventory, forget it. Naomi, stick to your little hobby at home." "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Perfectly," she confirmed. "The space is small. The rent is manageable. You could display your creations. Take custom orders. Who knows where it could lead? You just need a memorable name for it." "Naomi's Dolls?" I ventured. She wrinkled her nose. "Too generic. It needs to be something with a story. Something from your childhood. What was your favorite toy?" I thought back. I had a threadbare teddy bear with mismatched button eyes. My grandmother had made it for me. I called him Barnaby. He always looked slightly grumpy. "Barnaby." I remembered. "Barnaby," Eleanor repeated, savoring the word. "I like it. Barnaby's workshop. Or just the workshop. It sounds charming. It sounds real. The workshop, I said, a warmth spreading through my chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was thinking about the future instead of the past. And the future, suddenly, didn't seem so dark. Then it settled. Eleanor concluded, a satisfied smile on her face. Tomorrow, you talk to your husband. You close a chapter of your life. And then, you begin your new life with the workshop. The next day, I woke with a sense of dread and determination. Today was the day. I took a deep breath and called Leo. He answered on the third ring, his voice still thick with sleep. Naomi. Hi, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. You're back tonight, right? Yeah. My flight gets in around 7. Why? We need to talk, I said. I'll meet you at the apartment. At 8. Did something happen? I could hear the concern in his voice, and for a fleeting moment, it made me sick. Yes, I said. I'll see you tonight. I hung up, my heart pounding. Even now, knowing what I knew, the sound of his voice could still shake me. 5 years of marriage couldn't be erased in an instant, but the decision was made. There was no going back. That evening, Pascal met me outside the apartment building. He was a quiet, solid presence. He didn't ask any questions. Just said he would wait in his truck parked across the street. Call me if you need anything, he said, his gaze reassuring. Thank you, I said sincerely. I don't think he'll get physical. But, you never know. At 7:55 p.m., I let myself into the apartment. A strange feeling washed over me. It had only been a few days, but it felt like a lifetime. Everything was familiar, yet alien. The furniture, the curtains, the dishes in the kitchen. It was like walking onto the set of a play that had already ended. At 8 o'clock sharp, I heard a key in the lock. I straightened my back, sitting stiffly on the living room sofa. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. Naomi. Leo appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion and worry. He looked tired. His shirt was rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He dropped his suitcase by the door. What's going on? You're scaring me. I looked at him, at the man whose every expression I thought I knew, and realized he was a complete stranger to me. Sit down. Leo, I said, gesturing to the armchair opposite me. We need to talk. He sat, his eyes never leaving my face. Did something happen? Are you sick? No. I took a deep breath. I know. Leo, you know what? He frowned, but a flicker of panic crossed his face. About you? About B. I said, looking him straight in the eye. About the affair. About the baby. I know everything. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. How? He finally whispered. Does it matter? I shrugged. I was at the clinic last week. Wrong place. Wrong time. Or maybe right place. Right time. The words came out with a strange, calm detachment, looking at his stunned face. I didn't feel rage or pain. Just a vast, weary emptiness. Naomi. I can explain. He started, leaning forward, his expression pleading. It's not what you think. B and I, it was a mistake. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. A mistake? A year-long mistake? A mistake that's currently 7 months pregnant. That's quite a mistake. Leo. No. Listen. He stood up, taking a step toward me. But I held up a hand, and he stopped. It's complicated. We didn't want it to happen. It just did. I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right moment. Of course you were, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. After we had the baby, I heard you. He looked down, avoiding my eyes. I'm sorry. He mumbled. I never wanted to hurt you. Oh, don't lie. Not now. My voice hardened. You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew it would destroy me. And you did it anyway. You went to her. You lied to me. You invented trips to Stockholm. I was lost, he said, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that once seemed so endearing to me. I did love you. But then, B, and everything got so confusing. And now there's the baby. Yes, the baby, I said, leaning forward. By the way, are you sure it's yours? His head snapped up, his face contorted in shock and anger. What kind of a question is that? Of course it's mine. B would never. Like you would never cheat. I cut him off. Like she would never betray her best friend. You both swore loyalty to me. And you both lied. Why do you assume she isn't capable of lying to you? 2. It was a low blow. And I knew it. But the wound was too deep. The betrayal too raw. He stared at me. Speechless. Then he sank back into the chair. What do you want, Naomi? He asked. His voice defeated. Do you want me to end it with her? To come back to you? We can fix this. I know we can. No. I said. My voice clear and steady. There's nothing to fix. I want a divorce. A divorce? He looked at me. Genuinely shocked. But, Naomi, our life, we can't just throw it all away. You threw it away. Leo. The day you slept with my best friend. I'm leaving. Leaving? He looked around the room. Bewildered. Where will you go? That's no longer your concern. I stood up. I've already moved my things. The rest, you can have it. Or B can have it when she moves in. The furniture. The dishes. The linens. I don't want any of it. Wait. He stood up too, grabbing my arm. You can't just walk out like this. We have to talk about the apartment. Our finances? I pulled my arm away. The apartment is yours. It always was. As for the money, a sad smile touched my lips. I don't need your money. Leo. I make enough with my silly hobby. Naomi. He started. But I cut him off. And soon. I'll be opening my own shop. So don't worry about me. I walked toward the door. You planned this, he said. A note of accusation in his voice. No, I said, turning back to look at him one last time. I just got lucky. I found people who were willing to help me when I needed it most. Unlike you? Unlike B. I opened the door. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce papers. Don't try to find me. Naomi, he looked lost. Broken. Goodbye, Leo, I said, and closed the door behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, my legs shaking. It was done. It was over. 5 years of my life ended in a 10-minute conversation. Downstairs, Pascal was waiting by his truck. He saw me and immediately came over. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Yes. I nodded. A strange sense of calm washing over me. It's over. As we drove away, I looked back at the building, at the lighted window of the apartment that was no longer my home. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I just felt free. And pregnant. Yes, pregnant. The test I had taken the night before, in the bathroom of my new apartment, had shown to clear, undeniable blue lines. The ultimate irony. I had finally conceived. Just as my marriage was ending. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even Eleanor. I wanted to deal with Leo first. To close that door completely. And now, a new door was opening. We're here. Pascal's voice pulled me from my thoughts. We had arrived back at the Lincoln Park apartment. The light was on in my window on the 3rd floor. Eleanor was waiting. Thank you again, Pascal, I said as I got out of the truck. You've been a tremendous help. Don't mention it, he said with a small, shy smile. My aunt asked. I did it. She almost never asks for anything. So when she does, it's impossible to say no. She's an incredible woman. I agreed. I don't know what I would have done without her. Same thing. Just with more difficulty. Pascal replied, echoing Eleanor's own words. I couldn't help but smile back. Upstairs, the comforting smell of freshly baked bread filled the hallway. Eleanor opened the door before I could even knock. Well, she asked, her eyes searching my face. It's done, I said, taking off my coat. It was calmer than I expected. He denied it, then tried to justify it, then begged for a second chance. The usual script. And you? I told him I was leaving and that I wanted a divorce. I walked into the kitchen and sank onto a chair. And then I left. Good girl. Eleanor placed a cup of tea and a plate of warm rolls in front of me. You did the right thing. Now, things are clear. You can move forward. I looked at the steaming tea. And suddenly, my eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of pain or anger. They were tears of relief. It felt as if a massive weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. You know, I said, looking up at Eleanor, my voice trembling slightly. There's something else. Something I need to tell you. What is it? She asked. her expression growing serious. Did something else happen? I'm pregnant, I said simply. Eleanor froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. She slowly set it down on the table. Are you sure? Positive. I nodded. I took a test 2 days ago, and another one yesterday to be sure. Both positive. And how far along are you? 4. Maybe 5 weeks. I shrugged. My cycle has been so irregular from the stress. I didn't even notice I was late at first. Eleanor drummed her fingers on the table, a thoughtful expression on her face. And what are you going to do? I'm having this baby, I said, without a shred of doubt. I've wanted this for so long. It feels like a gift, even if it came in this strange, tangled wrapping paper. And Leo? She asked carefully. Are you going to tell him? I thought about it. Tell Leo? Why? So he could be torn between me and B? So he could feel trapped by duty? So he could try to be a part-time husband to 2 different women, and a father to 2 different children? No, I said, the decision solidifying in my mind. I'm not going to tell him. Not now. Anyway, maybe someday, when everything has settled. But for now, I just want to start my new life without him. You understand it won't be easy, Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm. Raising a child alone is a heavy burden. Physically, emotionally, financially. I understand. I nodded. But I can do it. I have my work. I'll have my shop. I have my savings. And I looked at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. I have you. The old woman's eyes glistened. Yes, Naomi, she said softly. You have me. And I will help you in any way I can. She paused. You know, I always dreamed of having grandchildren. It never happened. Perhaps this is fate. I felt a warm wave of emotion wash over me. This woman, who was practically a stranger, had become closer to me than my own family. And now, she was offering to be a grandmother to my child. It was more than I could have hoped for. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. For everything. For the help. The support. The apartment, for believing in me. There's no need for thanks, child, she said, patting my hand. You're strong. You'll manage. And I'll be right here, helping with advice, or babysitting, or whatever you need. I smiled through my tears. But there's so much to do, Eleanor suddenly said, her tone shifting to one of brisk efficiency. You need to see a doctor. Get an ultrasound. Start taking vitamins. And the shop. We need to get that organized. Oh, there's just so much. I laughed at her sudden burst of energy. We have time, I said. We have our whole lives. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of appointments and planning. I found a good obstetrician, had my first ultrasound, and saw the tiny, flickering heartbeat that confirmed the new life growing inside me. The doctor said everything looked perfect but advised me to rest and avoid stress. Avoid stress, I thought with a wry smile. Easy for her to say. Eleanor was an invaluable help. She not only provided me with a home but also found me an excellent, affordable lawyer to handle the divorce. And she was true to her word about the shop. The small space on the ground floor of a building on Clark Street was perfect. It had large display windows, a small back room for storage, and its own entrance. The owner, a retired professor and an old friend of Eleanor's, agreed to rent it to me for a symbolic amount for the first 3 months. See how things work out? Eleanor would say as she helped me paint the walls a warm, creamy white. Good people always appear when you need them most. I could only nod, unable to put into words the depth of my gratitude. My life, which had so recently been in ruins, was slowly taking on a new, hopeful shape. I received a few texts from Leo, first begging to see me, then angry, then pleading again. I didn't respond. What was there to say? He even called Martina, trying to get my new address. But my former boss, to her credit, told him nothing. He tried my parents, but they didn't know where I was either. I had told them only that Leo and I were taking some time apart. My mother lamented that I hadn't known how to hold on to a good man, while my father remained silent, a look of quiet understanding in his eyes. The grand opening of the workshop was set for mid-April. I worked tirelessly, sewing new dolls, setting up displays, and navigating the bureaucracy of starting a small business. My pregnancy, thankfully, was easy. Only a little morning sickness and a growing fatigue at the end of the day. But it felt like a small price to pay for the joy of placing my hand on my still flat belly. and feeling the promise of the life within. My lawyer informed me that Leo had received the divorce papers and had not contested them. The news brought a mix of relief and a faint, lingering sadness. 5 years of my life were officially coming to an end. B never tried to contact me. Perhaps Leo had told her that I knew. Or perhaps she was simply ashamed. Either way, I was relieved not to have to face her. The night before the opening, I lay awake, marveling at how much my life had changed in just a short months. Divorce, pregnancy, a new home, a new business. It felt like I was living someone else's life. In the morning, Eleanor arrived with a bag of fresh bagels and a thermos of coffee. Decaf, she announced, seeing my questioning look. Perfectly safe. Now, eat up. It's a big day. At the workshop, Pascal was already there, helping to hang a handcrafted wooden sign he had made for the shop. I looked around, a proud smile spreading across my face. The shop was exactly as I had dreamed it, light-filled and airy, with simple wooden shelves filled with my creations. Well, what do you think? Eleanor asked. It's perfect, I said. It's magical. At 11 o'clock, I officially opened the doors. The first customers soon trickled in, drawn by the whimsical window display. To my surprise, it wasn't just mothers with children. Adults came in alone, some looking for unique gifts, others just curious. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but ecstatic. I had sold 12 dolls and taken 5 custom orders. I told you it would work, Eleanor said, helping me close up. You have a real gift, Naomi. You put a little piece of your soul into every doll, and people can feel that. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. My belly grew, the shop flourished, and my friendship with Eleanor deepened into something that felt like family. Pascal was a frequent visitor. He would stop by to help with heavy lifting or small repairs, or sometimes just to bring me a cup of tea. I saw the way he looked at me, but I wasn't ready to think about another relationship. Not yet. In mid-July, when I was 5 months pregnant, something happened that would have shattered me just a few months earlier. I was closing out the shop when the bell on the door chimed. I looked up and froze. Standing in the doorway was B. She looked tired and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes. It was clear that coming here had not been easy for her. Hi, she said, her voice hesitant. Can I come in? I nodded wordlessly toward one of the armchairs I kept for customers. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a detached curiosity. Why was she here? What did she want? Your shop is beautiful, she said, looking around. And the dolls, they're incredible. Thank you, I said, my voice cool. But I don't think you came here to buy a doll. She looked down, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. No, I wanted to talk. To explain. To apologize. Even though I know I don't deserve it. I leaned back in my chair, resting a hand on my prominent belly. A gesture that had become second nature. Bia's eyes followed the movement, and then they widened in disbelief. You're pregnant, she whispered. Yes, I said simply. 5 months. But Leo never said anything. Leo doesn't know, I said. And he's not going to. Not for a while. At least. But the baby, is it his? It's my baby, I said firmly. Mine. Leo already has a child. Yours. How is he? By the way, he's fine, she said, looking away. He's growing. A heavy silence fell between us. I was in no hurry to make it easy for her. Naomi, she finally began, gathering her courage. I know there are no words that can undo what I did. I betrayed you. I betrayed our friendship. It's unforgivable. But I want you to know, I am truly sorry. Why did you do it, B? I asked, my voice even. She shook her head. I don't know. At first, it was just a flirtation. A thrill. We ran into each other at a party. We had a few drinks. I knew he was your husband. But that night, it was like it didn't matter. And after that, it was too late. We weren't too deep. And then you got pregnant. I finished for her. She nodded. It wasn't planned. And when I found out, I thought about not keeping it. But I couldn't. And Leo, he said he would support whatever decision I made. How noble of him, I said with a hint of irony. He's not a bad person. Naomi, she said quietly. He just got lost. We both did. And what's it like, being lost together? I asked, genuinely curious. B was silent for a moment, Then she sighed. It's not easy. Leo works all the time. He's barely home. When he is, he plays with the baby for a little while, and then he disappears into his study. He's trying. He really is. But she didn't finish the sentence. But he doesn't love you. I concluded for her. And it's eating you alive. Tears welled in her eyes. Yes, she admitted. Maybe it's karma. We destroyed your family. And now we can't seem to build our own. I looked at my former best friend. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just a profound weariness. Why did you really come here? B? I asked, cutting through the heavy silence. What do you want from me? Forgiveness, she whispered, her eyes pleading. Even though I know I don't deserve it. Forgiveness, I repeated, the word tasting strange on my tongue. You know, I've thought a lot about whether I could ever forgive you and Leo. And I realized something. It's not about whether you deserve it. It's about me. I need to let go of the anger. The hurt. If I don't, it will poison my life. I placed a hand on my belly. And his life, too. B listened in silence, her gaze fixed on my face. So, yes, B, I forgive you, I said. And the words felt true and liberating. Not for you. For me. But that doesn't mean we can be friends again. Too much has happened. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I understand. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. Thank you. Truly. She hesitated for a moment. And the baby, are you sure you don't want to tell Leo? I'm sure. I said firmly. This is my life. You to have yours. It's better this way. For everyone. She stood up, adjusting the strap of her purse. I'm glad you're doing so well, she said. And her voice sounded sincere. This shop. The baby, you seem happier now than you ever were with Leo. I am, I said. And I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I really am. She left without another word. When the door chimed behind her, I sat motionless for a long time, a strange sense of peace settling over me. It felt like the final, heavy stone had been lifted from my chest. That evening, as I recounted the visit to Eleanor, I realized I could speak of my ex-husband and my ex-best friend without any bitterness. They were just people from a past life, characters in a story that was no longer mine. You did well to forgive her, Eleanor said, pouring us both a cup of herbal tea. Holding on to a grudge is a heavy burden. It keeps you from moving on. And you, my dear, need to look forward, not back. You know what's strange? I said thoughtfully. I almost feel grateful to them. If it weren't for their betrayal, I'd still be trapped in that unhappy marriage. I wouldn't have opened the shop. I wouldn't have started this new life. And you wouldn't have met me. Eleanor added with a small smile. That, too. I laughed. You know, I've always meant to ask. You went through something similar, didn't you? You hinted at it once. Her face grew serious for a moment, then softened. Yes, I did, she said quietly. A long time ago. In another life. My husband, he was a handsome, charming man. All the women adored him. Especially one. My best friend. She paused. For a long time. I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. But eventually, it became impossible to ignore. What did you do? I asked gently. The same thing you did, she said simply. I left. I packed one suitcase, moved to a new city, and started over from nothing. It was hard, especially at first. But then it got easier. I found a job at a dressmaker's shop, started taking my own commissions, and eventually, I built a life for myself. A good life, a life that was truly mine. And them. Your husband and your friend? They got married. She shrugged. Had two children. From what I hear, they had a decent life. He passed away a few years ago. She still lives in the same town. She writes to me sometimes. Tries to reconnect. But, as you said yourself, some bridges can't be rebuilt. I looked at this remarkable woman, seeing her not just as a kind mentor, but as someone who had walked the same painful path I was on now. Why did you decide to help me? I asked. That day I showed up at your door. You barely knew me. Why did you let me in? Eleanor smiled. A special kind of smile that made her look years younger. Because when it happened to me, no one helped, she said simply. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever met a woman in the same situation, I would do everything in my power to make it easier for her than it was for me. That's how the world keeps turning. Naomi. On small acts of kindness. On a hand extended in the darkness. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Eleanor's eyes twinkled with a familiar mischief. There is one way. If it's a girl, name her after me. A girl, I said, surprised. But I don't know the gender yet. It's a girl, she said with absolute certainty. I can tell by the way you're carrying. You'll see. I laughed. All right. It's a deal. If it's a girl, her name will be Eleanor. The heat of summer gave way to the crisp, cool days of autumn. Chicago dressed itself in gold and crimson. For me, it was a time of quiet anticipation. I was in my final trimester, my belly large and round. The baby, a constant, active presence, kicked and squirmed, a little life preparing to meet the world. The ultrasound had confirmed Eleanor's prediction. It was a girl. Little Eleanor. The name felt right. The workshop was thriving. I hired an assistant, a woman named Lucia in her 50s with kind eyes and hands that seemed to work magic with a needle and thread. Lucia had worked for years in a garment factory before it shut down. She brought a warm, steady presence to the shop, and the customers, especially the children, adored her. How are you feeling, dear? Lucia would ask me every morning. You're not overdoing it, are you? I'm fine, I would insist, even as my back ached and my ankles swelled. In truth, I was grateful for the work. It kept my mind off the anxieties that crept in during the long, sleepless nights. Could I really do this alone? Was I making a mistake by keeping the baby from Leo? It was during those moments of doubt that Eleanor was my rock. She seemed to have a sixth sense for my moods, showing up at my door with a home-cooked meal or simply sitting with me in quiet companionship. One evening, I finally worked up the courage to ask her a question that had been on my mind for a long time. Eleanor, did you ever have children? She stilled, her teacup poised in her hand. A shadow of an old pain crossed her face before she composed herself. No, Naomi, she said softly. It wasn't meant to be. I'm sorry, I murmured, embarrassed. I didn't mean to pry. It's all right, she smiled gently. It's an old story. You see, when I left my husband, I was pregnant. I gasped. What happened? I lost the baby, she said, her voice flat. The stress, the move, my body just couldn't handle it. After that, I could never conceive again. Oh, Eleanor, I said, reaching for her hand. I'm so sorry. Don't be, she said, her voice regaining its strength. I came to terms with it a long time ago. Life doesn't always give us what we want, but it often gives us what we need. I never became a mother in the traditional sense, but I had hundreds of students over the years, girls to whom I pass on my craft, my passion. That is a kind of motherhood, too. She paused, her gaze distant. And now, I have you, she added, her smile returning. And soon, I will have little Eleanor. Isn't that a miracle? A lump formed in my throat. Yes, it was a miracle. That in the darkest moment of my life, I had found this woman who had become my family. You know, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I would be honored if you would be her godmother. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. Oh, Naomi, she whispered. I would love that more than anything in the world. We embraced. Two women brought together by pain, now bound by love and hope. In that moment, I knew I was no longer afraid of the future. Whatever happened, I was not alone. Little Eleanor decided to make her entrance into the world 2 weeks early, on a crisp Halloween morning. The labor was long and difficult, but through it all, Eleanor was by my side, holding my hand, wiping my brow, and whispering words of encouragement. And then, finally, after hours of pain and effort, I heard it, a loud, indignant cry, the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It's a girl, the midwife said, placing a tiny, squirming bundle on my chest. A healthy, beautiful girl. I looked down at her wrinkled face and shock of dark hair, and a wave of love so powerful it took my breath away washed over me. All the pain, all the heartbreak of the past year, melted away. Hello, Eleanor, I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my face. Welcome to the world. The first few months of motherhood were a beautiful, chaotic blur. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, a constant, Low-grade anxiety about this tiny, fragile creature who depended on me for everything. Eleanor was a lifesaver, a constant source of support and practical help. Leo called. Of course. After the baby was born, I had finally sent him a short, formal email with a picture, informing him that he had a daughter named Eleanor. He called almost every day. At first, I didn't answer. Then, finally, I picked up. He congratulated me, his voice sounding strained. He asked about the baby, and then he said what I knew he would say. He wanted to see her. I don't know what to do. I confessed to Eleanor one afternoon, as the baby slept peacefully in her bassinet. He's her father. He has a right to know her. But I don't want him back in my life. I don't want the drama, the complications. I understand, Eleanor said. But the child needs a father. Naomi. It doesn't mean you have to be a couple. But she deserves to know who he is. I knew she was right. Sooner or later, I would have to navigate this. Better now, while Eleanor was still a baby. Okay, I said, taking a deep breath. I'll call him. We'll arrange something. But he showed up before I had the chance. One afternoon, when Eleanor was 2 months old, I was at the shop for the first time since the birth. Lucia was cooing over the baby when the bell on the door chimed. A moment later, Lucia came into the back room, her face pale. Naomi, she whispered. There's a man out front. He says he's the baby's father. My heart stopped. Taking a deep breath, I scooped my daughter into my arms and walked into the shop. Leo was standing by the window, looking older, tireder than I remembered. When he turned and saw us, his face crumpled. Naomi, he said, taking a step forward. She's beautiful. He looked at the baby, his eyes filled with a raw, painful longing. Can I? He asked, his voice cracking. I nodded. He reached out a trembling hand and gently stroked the baby's cheek. She stirred but didn't wake. I want to be in her life. Naomi, he said, his eyes pleading with me. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But please, she's my daughter. I looked at him, at the desperation on his face, and then I looked at my sleeping child. Eleanor was right. She deserved a father. Okay, Leo, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We can try. For her sake. His visits started tentatively. Once a week, on Sunday afternoons, he would arrive, always punctual, always bearing a small, carefully chosen gift for the baby. He was awkward at first, unsure how to hold her, how to soothe her cries. I would watch from a distance, a knot of old and new emotions tightening in my chest. It was strange to see him in this new role, stripped of his usual confidence, looking vulnerable and uncertain. Slowly, painstakingly, he learned to change a diaper, to warm a bottle, to recognize the subtle cues of her discomfort or delight. And Eleanor, in that mysterious way of infants, seemed to recognize him. His deep voice would calm her when she was fussy. His presence seemed to soothe her. One afternoon, as he held her, she broke into a wide, gummy, and completely unintentional smile. She smiled at me. He exclaimed, his face lighting up with a joy so pure it momentarily erased the lines of exhaustion and regret that seemed permanently etched there. Did you see that, Naomi? She smiled. I saw, I said, not having the heart to tell him it was probably just gas. I let him have his moment. It was a small, fragile bridge being built between them, and I wouldn't be the one to tear it down. We rarely talked about his other life. I knew, through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, that things would be restrained. Their son, it was said, was a difficult baby, and the pressures of new parenthood were taking their toll. I didn't ask for details, and he didn't offer any. Our conversations were a carefully curated landscape, focused solely on our daughter, her sleep schedule, her eating habits, her latest developmental milestone. It was a safe, neutral territory. Eleanor observed these Sunday visits with her usual quiet wisdom. He's trying, she commented one evening, and the little one is bonding with him. That's a good thing. As Eleanor grew, so did Leo's role in her life. The supervised visits in my apartment evolved into short walks in the park, then trips to the zoo. I watched them go, a pang of something I couldn't quite name: jealousy, regret, loss, twisting inside me. This was the family life I had once dreamed of, now playing out in a fractured, piecemeal version. The workshop, meanwhile, was my sanctuary and my salvation. It was more successful than I had ever imagined. The dolls, born from my own private pain, seemed to resonate with people. I started a new line, inspired by an offhand comment from Lucia. The guardians. Each doll was unique, designed to be a protector. There was a guardian of dreams, with wise allies, a guardian of courage, with the heart of a lion, a guardian of laughter, with a perpetually joyful grin. They came with little handwritten stories, and they sold out almost as soon as I made them. One day, a woman in a sharp business suit came into the shop. She introduced herself as a buyer for a high-end children's boutique in New York. She wanted to carry the guardians. It was a turning point, a validation that what I was doing was more than just a hobby. It was a real, viable business. My business. 5 years passed. Life found a new rhythm, a new normal. The workshop flourished. I opened a second, larger location downtown. The partnership with the New York boutique led to features in magazines, and a steady stream of online orders. I was a business owner, an artist, a mother. I was a version of myself I never could have imagined. Little Eleanor grew into a bright, curious, and fiercely independent girl, a perfect blend of my features and Leo's intense, dark eyes. He was a constant in her life. He never missed a Sunday. He was there for every school play, every birthday, every scraped knee. He and me had separated when their son was 2. He never spoke ill of her, only saying that they were better as co-parents than as partners. He moved into a small apartment nearby, to be closer to Eleanor. Our relationship, Leo's and mine, settled into a peaceful, if distant, coexistence. The sharp edges of betrayal had been worn smooth by time and the shared love for our daughter. We were two people bound by a child, navigating the complex terrain of a family that had been broken, and then reassembled into a new shape. And there was Pascal. He had remained a quiet, steady presence in my life. He was the one I called when my sink was clogged, the one who helped me assemble furniture for the new shop, the one who would sit with me in comfortable silence after a long day. Our friendship slowly, cautiously, blossomed into something more. He was patient. He never pushed. He understood the ghosts I lived with. He loved me. Not in spite of my broken pieces, but because of them. He loved Eleanor as if she were his own. When Eleanor was 4, Pascal and I got married. It was a small, simple ceremony in the garden behind Eleanor Vance's apartment building. Our closest friends were there. Lucia, Martina, and Leo. He came alone, wished us a happiness that seemed genuine, and gave his daughter a hug that was full of a quiet, sad acceptance. He understood that his place in my life was fixed, that he was the father of my child. But Pascal was a partner of my heart. A year later, our son, Cedric, was born. Eleanor was a doting, protective older sister. She would read him stories, sing him off-key lullabies, and proudly introduce him to everyone as my baby brother. To her, there were no complicated lines of biology. Pascal was daddy, and Leo was papa. It was that simple. The day Eleanor turned 5, the unthinkable happened. Eleanor Vance, my mentor, my friend, my surrogate mother, passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 75 years old. The loss was a physical blow, leaving a gaping hole in our lives. At the funeral, I held my daughter's hand, my own grief overshadowed by the need to be strong for her. That night, as I was tucking her into bed, she looked at me with her serious, old soul eyes. "Mommy," she said, her voice small. "Grandma Eleanor is a guardian now, right?" "What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, stroking her hair. "Like the dolls," she explained patiently. "But she's a real one. She's going to watch over us from the sky." Tears streamed down my face. "Yes, my love," I whispered, hugging her tight. "I think you're exactly right. She's our guardian now." A week later, Eleanor's lawyer contacted me. She had left me everything, our 2 apartments, a surprising amount of savings, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. That evening, with trembling hands, I opened it. The letter was written in her elegant, familiar script. "My dearest Naomi," it began. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not be sad for too long. I lived a full life, and I left in peace. Do you remember when I told you about my husband? The one who left me for my best friend? I didn't tell you the whole story that day. That man, he was Leo's father." I gasped, the letter shaking in my hands. "Yes, my dear. Fate has a strange and tangled sense of humor. When I saw you that day in the clinic, so lost and broken, I knew I had to help you. It was my chance. You see, a chance to right a wrong from a generation ago. I couldn't save my own family, but perhaps I could help you build yours. Do not hold Leo's weakness against him. He was only repeating the patterns he learned. But unlike his father, he found the strength to be a good dad to your daughter. And that is worth a great deal. Know that wherever I am, I will be watching over you. You, my little namesake Eleanor, Cedric, and your whole beautiful, messy, wonderful family. As your clever daughter said, I will be your guardian. Be happy. Naomi, you have earned it. With all my love, Eleanor. I held the letter to my chest, sobbing. It all made sense now. Her immediate, fierce protectiveness of me, the strange sense of destiny that had always surrounded our friendship. The circle was complete. A story of betrayal that had spanned 2 generations had finally been closed. Not with vengeance, but with kindness, with forgiveness, with love. Later that night, I went to the workshop. The familiar scent of fabric and thread was a comfort. I sat down at my sewing table and began to work. I was making a new guardian. One with silver hair, wise, knowing eyes, and a gentle, mischievous smile. The guardian of family. The most important one of all. As my needle moved through the soft cloth, I whispered into the quiet of the shop, "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything." When it was finished, I placed the doll in the center of the front window display. It seemed to look out at the sleeping city with a calm, benevolent gaze, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that somewhere, beyond what we can see, my friend was smiling.